All right, it's 5:30. Start the meeting. Rhonda, will you call the roll, please?
Temple,
Here.
Ms. Williams,
Here.
Person West, Dr. Reddish,
Here.
Ms. McLean,
Here.
Mrs. Wonka, and Mr. Steele.
One coming through the door.
Executive closed session per North Little Rock School District Policy 1.14A, stating that private or closed discussions by the board may occur as part of a regular or special board meeting. Executive sessions may be held only for the purpose of considering employment, appointment, promotion, demotion, disciplining, or resignation of an employee, or to discuss matters of pupil punishment when requested by parent or legal guardian. No resolution, agreement, or motion considered in the executive session shall be legally binding unless the board reconvenes in public session and presents the item for a vote of membership. Further, Arkansas Code Title 25, Chapter 19, Section 106 2C states that you have to announce the specific purpose of the executive session. So will you please join me in executive session for discussing the following matters: employment, appointment, promotion, demotion, disciplining, or resignation of an employee.
The first action item is action item 4.1, the employment of personnel. The superintendent recommends the employment of personnel as discussed in executive closed session.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the employment of personnel as discussed in the executive session.
Second.
Moved and properly second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Madam President.
Madam
Members of the
President, I
board.
do have a comment. You recognize. I just want to thank Amy for her service to the North Little Rock School District. She's just wonderful. She's been a pleasure to work with. I'm guilty. I know a little bit more about what happens at the high school in 7th Street. I'm a little guilty of that. But she's done a wonderful job, and we're gonna hate to see you go. Thank you.
Madam President, members of our Board of Education, the next action item is 4.2, the Arkansas Imagination Library Partnership. The superintendent recommends to approve the Arkansas Imagination Library Partnership as discussed in open session at our last board meeting.
Madam Chair, I so move that we accept 4.2, the Arkansas Imagination Library Partnership that was discussed in our last workshop.
Second.
Moved and properly second. Is there any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Madam President, members of our Board of Education, the next action item is 4.3, the North Little Rock School District Instructional and Wraparound Services Support Reorganization Plan Proposal. This is Phase 4. Members of my staff and I would like to present that information to you at this time. Madam President, members of our Board of Education, for the record, my name is Greg Paluski, the proud superintendent of the North Little Rock School District. Joining me are my colleagues, Dr. Tori Hooper, our deputy superintendent, Mr. Jacob Smith, our executive director of human resources, and Mr. Brian Brown, our chief financial officer. As you know, over the last 4 years now, we have started with the superintendent's 100-day transition plan summary report all the way back. That goes to April 15th of 2021. That really starts our work of transformation and moving forward. And in one of those recommendations was a significant need to reorganize resources across the school district to better serve all of our students at the highest possible level. We've been here before. This is actually Phase 4 in which we're presenting tonight, and specifically around instructional and wraparound services support reorganization plan. I'm not sure who's helping me to drive today. Oh, okay. So a little bit of background, and you have these packets that are before you. Ms. Colquitt, I do believe this entire packet is presented to the public. It can be accessed online right now, and you have a hard copy in front of you. The first part of understanding this reorganization is to start with the reform initiative that goes all the way back prior to my arrival, is around opportunity culture. Some of you may have been here at that time when opportunity culture, when that was approved by the board some years ago, started with a grant from the State Department, and I think had a good premise at the end of that. Was really about trying to help teachers and improve teachers. And some of that model had some incentives in it for those individuals that took those positions to use their knowledge and skills to help teachers in the craft of improving teaching and learning. So you've heard these terms around our district, and that is in the MCL model. That's what that's referred to, multi-classroom leader, MCL. There's a full release MCL part of the model and a partial release. So what a fully released MCL is a classroom teacher that essentially does not have any teaching responsibility of students. And so they're released from their daily duties to go work with other teachers. And then sometimes they work with different groups of teachers, and I'm going to get into that, or numbers of teachers as it relates to the stipend that they've been awarded. There's also partial released MCLs. A partial released MCL is a classroom teacher that teaches a portion of that day, but is released in another portion of that day, so they have time to go work with other teachers. And the last part of that are the Reach Associates, or also our paraeducators. The Reach Associates are the ones that are paraeducators. As you know, we've had paraeducators that help in one-on-one classes. They help support with class size, individualized instruction. In this model, they had been given a stipend as well, but when that partial release teacher leaves to go work with other teachers, they need somebody to be instructing the class, and that was the role, or is the current role, of the Reach Associate. Connected to this, but unconnected, is the parent engagement professional. And so even though the parent engagement professional is not part of the opportunity culture model, it was brought in at the same time for good reason, right? Because we have a significant need in North Little Rock School District of parent support, parent engagement. You know, in our strategic plan, that's number 5, which is around community engagement and communication, and supporting our parents with helping with some of the struggles their children have that we know can sometimes be a barrier or sometimes be a challenge to the learning environment, whether that's food, whether that's clothing, whether that's mental health service, so forth and so on. So even though it's not part of the model, it came in and was connected at the same time. So in page number 3, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but what we've shown here is just some the roles and responsibilities. This is not the entire job description of a multi-classroom leader or a Reach Associate, but it is a little bit of a summary of some of the major responsibilities. Now let's talk about the funding model. So how is this funded? This was originally funded from a grant. However, I want to draw your attention to the second paragraph, and I'm going to talk about Table 2. So in this model, if you were a multi-classroom leader, an MCL, you'll see that if you worked with or were leading teachers from 1 to 3 teachers, you were given a $7,000 stipend. And then if you had 4 to 5 teachers, it was an $8,500 stipend. And if you were a level 3 or you led 6 to 9 teachers, it was a $10,000 stipend. Everybody with me so far? It was based on the number of teachers you were working with. Now on the Reach Associate, remember the one that came in, they were awarded $1,500 stipend. So we all know in stipend land, we've been talking about stipends. Stipends are awarded in addition to their normal duties and responsibilities in which we pay them for, right? So when Mr. Smith gives contracts out, the contract goes out with your base salary, plus this added extra benefit. So what you can see here, and I'm going to go through this in Table 2, is you have all of our schools that are listed. I'm kind of going to go a little bit of back and forth, but I want to draw your attention to the NA, because the schools that have NA in them, we highlighted those in yellow, are schools that are at the time that chose not to participate in the model. Again, I wasn't here at the time, but it's my understanding that principals were afforded the opportunity or the flexibility if you wanted to sign up and be a part of it. I know they went to Indianapolis and they visited, but they gave some principals some flexibility. So that's why, number one, not every school has an MCL, partial MCL, or a Reach Associate. Now, in some of those other campuses, they do have different levels of sports. We'll talk about that, like an instructional coach, a literacy coach. So there's multiple models here that are going on in the system, and that's part of this reorganization, is getting that all organized cohesively together to further support schools. So what you see here, and let me go back one. So what you see in the number of stipends, When you look at that stipend amount, you're probably asking yourself, so wait a second, if it's $10,000, why does it say $12,265? That's the base of that stipend, and on top of that is the benefits to that. So we want to show what we call a fully loaded. And so this shouldn't be any surprise to our board or anybody in our district, because I've been wondering and seeking and studying about this model since I've arrived. One of the reasons we put it on hold early on was to study it. I will tell you, in that beginning 100-day transition plan summary report, listening to about 180 teachers, that expectations of MCLs was pretty much all over the place. They were being used in different ways, and sometimes for what the intention was, and sometimes for not. And there's lots of reasons for that. And there was a lot of leadership turnover at the time. There was a lack of professional development. There's just lots of things that I think that just led to kind of where the model stood and where the model is today. And as we've engaged our multi-classroom leaders, and many of them are extremely talented in this process of improving instruction. However, there is an additional stipend that they get, but that stipend is for the work that they do during the day. There is not, to my understanding, any extra duties or responsibilities that they do beyond the regular contractual day. Now, the second part of the model in this reorganization is our parent engagement professionals and human service workers. We know in our community that we have significant needs at every single one of our campuses, period. We have about roughly 76% of the students that we serve in the North Little Rock School District come from poverty. You can see very, very quickly where some schools have parent engagement professionals and human service workers. Some don't have either. Some have a human service worker but not a parent engagement professional. And so you can look just very quickly and see how disjointed the service delivery model is. Yes, it's helping a school, but all of our schools are in need of support. So what you see in that center column, that is the salary and fringe benefits. So that's fully loaded, if you will. If I go back one, the total stipend amount of the MCLs ends up at the neighborhood there of just over $300,000 that we have been paying, I believe, since 2018, Mr. Brown, somewhere around there. And so in the next one, you also see, and this is in the parent engagement professional as well as the human service worker, total compensation there, just about $750,000. So what we've listed here, not to go into a lot of detail, but is a little bit of the roles and responsibilities of the parent engagement professional versus the human service worker. Not going to go through all of that, and we'll give you the whole description if you want it. But what we found is there's just a lot of overlap in cases between these two roles. And sometimes it's overlap and it's at the same school, or one school has it and one school doesn't. So the vision for this is to more strategically align our resources to better support our families. So as we always do, why change? Why do we need to change? Why should we be thinking about a different service delivery model to support our students, to support our teachers, and to support our families? Obviously, there are some major drivers behind that. Number one, I'm not going to go through all that, but the Every Student Succeeds Act, that is the federal law by the government that we are held by, and that is the accountability. What comes out of that is our letter grades, how our letter grades are formed, the laws that we have to abide by to ensure that our students are learning and improving. You know as well as I do, it's been very new, but that is the LEARNS Act. And the LEARNS Act has had a significant change in education here in Arkansas, with a big emphasis on literacy, as it should be. And if you unpack that even further, which is in the Right to Read Act that's in the law, which has an emphasis to ensure that every single teacher has the background of the science of reading. They're either proficient in the science of reading, they have awareness in the science of reading, and more importantly to that, as we all know, which you just approved, the Imagination Library, which why early learning and early childhood is so important. Our goal as a school district is to make sure that every child reads by the end of grade 2. The state under the LEARNS Act is to ensure that they can read and compute by the end of grade 3. And there's more specifics around the law. What happens if they're not? They've got to go to a summer school program. We're still waiting on. But the emphasis there, obviously, as we all know, which is a need here, which is literacy. I only want to draw your attention. This is the number of, I'm on page 11. This is the total number of licensed staff. So we have 718 licensed staff. So when we say licensed staff, that means teachers. That also means assistant principals. That means the superintendent, that deputy superintendent that hold licensure as well. In the center column, you see that we have 641 licensed staff that either have our proficiency in the science of reading or have awareness. And we have 77 that have not met that criteria. Those individuals have met with HR. There is a timeline. I'm not going to get into all that, but there are multiple pathways. If you're a novice teacher, you've got a little bit more time than your experienced teacher. But we wanted to show you that is because, number one, it's the importance of the science of reading and the importance of literacy and teaching literacy at every level in every content area across the district. Also, I want to note that we currently serve over 100 novice teachers here in the North Little Rock School District. So that means we have 100 teachers that are in either their very first year or up to their 5th year. And then we've got them on different licenses as well. So there's more of a need to be having coaching side-by-side work and rolling up our sleeves with our classroom teachers. You know this as well as part of the LEARNS Act is the new assessment called Atlas. We just finished our writing portion. We're preparing for this now becomes the local state accountability measure that will be the test that is taken as a portion in determining letter grades as we go forward in that process. You also notice, and this comes a little bit before our district data trends, we've always been constant about open and dialogue and being transparent about our data. You'll see it references the superintendent's 100-day transition plan. It also recognizes the school board's support of the 100 days, which is about reorganizing the district to make sure that it's optimum efficiency, how our letter grades are calculated. You've seen the North Little Rock School District index. We've showed you this over the years. This shows everything before the pandemic, and certainly after the pandemic. But what you do see, and I want to draw your attention to the last, the last column there, is anything that is in black is showing progress from the year before. So what we do see as we continue to come out of the pandemic, we are seeing our schools making some improvement. I want to draw your attention because I think it's worthy. I'm not going to go into all of this, but just look at Glenview. From after the pandemic, a minus 8.36. Then the following year, they went to a negative 1.1 index difference to then a positive 7.52. That's significant. And so I want to draw that attention because there's a lot of our principals, our teacher assistant principals that are continuing to do awesome work every single day, but we still have work to do. And we've got some schools that are simply not where they need to be, and we need to continue to support our teachers and we need to continue to support our administrators in this work. The last thing I'll draw, and then we'll kind of close out and what the reorganization looks like, is drawing your attention back to another data point that we did upon my arrival is the curriculum management audit. I'm not going to go through all these recommendations, but it is further support of why we need to look at changing some of our current structure in order to support the teaching and learning process. So here's the new proposal of the reorganization of our instructional service delivery model. And I'll go through more strategically. I'm not going to read all that. Essentially, in the new model that we're proposing is that it will add 4 literacy instructional specialists, and it will add 2 literacy instructional specialists at the secondary level. So let's think about, why are we putting so many resources into literacy? It's because of the need. These literacy instructional specialists will work directly with classroom teachers. We've categorized, and this is just a draft of what an assignment might look like, But everything in blue we've identified as our level 1, which we call our priority campuses. These are our schools that are in most need of support. The ones that are in shaded yellow, we label those as level 2, meaning they might not need as much intense support as maybe another school. So for an example, this is not what the schedule is going to be, but what it could be, and we're not going to go down into those weeds, but the literacy instructional specialist you'll see might be spending 3 days at 7th Street Elementary School, and then the next 2 days at Indian Hills, and then back to 7th Street, right? Vice versa. Secondary, there is a significant need for support for literacy instructional specialists at the secondary level, one dedicated to the middle school level, and then one dedicated to the high school level, both the high school, the COE, high school, the academy, and the COE. These instructional specialists will, and I'll show you that later, but they will report directly to our curriculum coordinators. Our coordinators are out. They've got a lot of work that they're engaged in, but there's only one of them. And so adding and connecting to that content office to be able to spread the support is part of the vision of the model. The second part is in mathematics, and the reason, obviously, for literacy, for lots of reasons, is not only the data, but that's a huge tested area. The second huge tested area is math. And so we have to put resources in math. Ms. Edwards, Ms. Higgins, there's only 2 of them. And we know that our schools need more support. And so there will be, in this reorganized model, 1 math instructional specialist and at the elementary level and 1 math instructional specialist at the secondary level. And because they're 1, again, it's not that they're going to be 3, or it might be more days at one campus than another. We'll work with our curriculum staff, school performance, all of us to identify the needs. But just remember, with those needs, they might have to shift based upon quantitative and qualitative data. Science, which I'm actually proud about this, and you're going to get a science lesson here in a little bit from Dr. Harbin. Science is now back as a tested area. I think that's a good thing. But that also requires support for teachers. It's going to be part of a school's letter grade. It'll be part of the calculation of that. So in this reorganization plan is to add a science instructional specialist at the elementary level and a science instructional specialist at the secondary level. And last but not least is ESOL. Our ESOL population continues to grow. It is a student group, just like in the area of special ed, where we see some of our largest gaps of our learners. We need additional support, and Ms. Marshall needs additional support, as Ridge Road obviously is one of our largest elementary schools that has our highest need. Our teachers that are teaching in ESOL need more support as well. So in this proposal, in this reorganization, calls for an ESOL instructional specialist that will work K-12. In the proposed wraparound service model, this is part B of this. So in the wraparound service model, it will include 5 wraparound service specialists. So, and I'm going to go through. So we're kind of collapsing the human service worker, we're collapsing the parent engagement, and we're redesigning the position to be the wraparound service specialist that will be serving more than one campus. This position also calls for the reorganization of the wraparound service coordinator. These 7 wraparound specialists will report directly to the coordinator of wraparound services. By such a model, as you could see from before, now we can cover all of our campuses in a much better coordinated effort, where we're wrapping and connecting with not only the community. A major part of their role is not only attendance and making sure that they're reaching out, but it's around all the areas that some of our children struggle with, whether that's hunger, whether that's our backpack program. Ms. Person West, I know you're always talking about needing coats and hats and all those. We need this at every single one of our campuses, not just some of our campuses. So let me go through the position crosswalk. This is something, number one, that you've seen every single time we come with a reorganization, just so that we can explain it to you as well as the public. The other thing I want to draw your attention to, as I mentioned before, from the first reorganization, is that ESSER goes away, and it was in that plan that was approved that at some point in time we've got to tighten our, look at our budgets and make room for our curriculum coordinators to bring them back in, because those funds are going to go away. I think they've got to be spent out, Mr. Brown, by December. Correct.
This December?
Correct. I also want to draw your attention to, with the exception, this December of 2024. Yes. So the other thing I want to draw your attention to is that every single funding source in here, with the exception of one stipend, is through either federal money, so that's federal Title I money, and that is state ESA money, and we're going to talk about that. So with the exception of one stipend, which is only an operating, everything else is federal state category funding. The next thing I want to draw your attention to before we go down and start talking about each one of these is, if you remember, obviously in the LEARNS Act required that any teacher that was below 50,000, we were going to bring them up to the 50,000. And the board did that. We had to do that by law. If you're a teacher that's in Title I and you are below the 50,000, you cannot use that money the state gave us for the LEARNS Act to raise their salary to 50,000. That money has to come out of the state and the federal money as well. That's another reason why we've got to look at consolidating and looking at these resources as well, because we have employees that fit that category, but we can't use operating money to do it.
And that's per LEARNS Act.
Per the LEARNS Act and per the law, that
Right.
only those funds allocated are in the operating for the operating salary.
So the state did, they issued funding for us for the LEARNS Act as a supplement to offset that requirement. They only issued money to us for employees that are funded out of operating. That's the way they calculated. So every employee that was funded out of Title I was not included in the state's allocation of funds to offset the LEARNS Act. So
But we
we're
still
on
had
our
to.
own.
But we still had to bring them up
That's
to.
correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
We
There's
still
some
had to bring them up to
Still
the
have
50.
to be at that $50,000
That's
level.
And it's coming from our operational fund.
No.
No?
So they still, just like Mr. Steele said, if they're in a Title I position, which is how they're funded, the money to get them to 50,000 has to come out of the federal and state money as it is in Title I and ESA.
Oh, okay.
It cannot come out of, like Mr. Brown said, let's take a teacher that's out of school that's being paid out of operating money. That money that came from the state, it's in operating. So if their operating salary is in there, we use the 50,000, or we use the money from the LEARNS Act for those in the operation. Meaning, now this budget, which did not increase, but we've had to increase it because of the salaries. Does that everybody?
Yes.
Get that piece? Okay. So, and you'll see, and you're used to this as well. So in this proposal, there are currently 9 fully released multi-classroom leaders with an additional stipend paid out of Title I, and you'll see the dollar amount that there is in blue. So this proposal is that those positions get reorganized. So those positions go away at the end of this academic year, and they are replaced with 9 specialist positions. So that would be 2 literacy instructional specialists. Again, the funding will be Title I and ESA. They will all work K-5. You'll see there's 2, 4, 6 of them. But we'll have 2 of them that will directly report to Ms. Chris, the coordinator of early childhood and school readiness. There'll be 2 literacy instructional specialists that will also work K-5. They're Title I and ESA funded as well. They will report to Ms. Langston as the coordinator of elementary reading. The 2 that says a literacy instructional specialist, number 2, again, that's Title I and ESA. That is for secondary. So one of those specialists will be dedicated to 6-8, and one of those specialists will be dedicated 9-12, and they will report to the coordinator of secondary reading, Ms. Cruz. One of those positions will be the ESAW instructional specialist. Again, if you follow that line across, that's K-12. They'll report to Ms. Marshall as the coordinator of ESAW and World Classical Languages. Also out of that 9, it gets restructured to a math specialist. That would be at the elementary level to report to Ms. Edwards. and then one math specialist dedicated to secondary, which would be the coordinator, Ms. Higgins. This also includes, in the second line, the fully released MCL leader with additional. There was one that was paid out of ESA, not Title I. That's why it's separate in this line item. That position would be eliminated. In number 3, we have several instructional coaches at those other campuses. Again, different titles, trying to get this all aligned. Those 2 will be reorganized to become the 2 science specialists. They will work, one will work K-5, the other one will work 6-12, and they will report to Dr. Harbin, our coordinator of science and advanced programs. The other 2 you'll see there, that's Title I funds. Those 2 FTEs are recommended to be eliminated. The other instructional coaches there that are paid out of ESSER, since that goes away, those 2 will be eliminated. And then the partial multi-classroom leader, this is specifically stipends only. There's 9 of those. All those stipends would be eliminated for cost savings. The partial multi-classroom leader, line number 7, that is a stipend only. That was one. There's 5 of those, but they're paid out of ESA. We would eliminate that stipend only for those employees. So remember, if you're a partial employee, you're still in that role as the teacher. It's just the stipend portion would be coming away. You'd still have your teaching position, if that makes sense. We do have one there's one stipend. It was a partial MCL, came into that model. It's paid out of operating, and it was currently being used to support the district coordinator of school counseling, which is actually in Ms. Hale's office. And so we just want to correct that and make it right. It was under the opportunity culture. We want to make it right, and there still is a significant need. And then all that is showing is just basically what is happening now. But it came into existence under the opportunity culture. But the way that it should have been is through the operational process as well. But there's a significant need for that. The 9 Reach Associates, those are the paras with the additional stipends. Those would be eliminated. We do have a turnover rate of about 17 or 18 para professionals, and we'll get into that here in a second. And then there are 3 human service workers. As we talked about in that model that was a little bit disjointed, those 3 would be eliminated. And then again, the positions, let me go back one, because we talked about the...
Which page did you go back to?
Wait. I'm trying to think. There should be one on here about the parent engagement professionals. There's the coordinator, human service. We might have to look at that. I just don't see that because...
Service workers.
Well, there's 3 human service workers, but there should be the other parent engagement professionals. So I will come back and I'll go back through the book, but that should be on here too, because remember the parent engagement professionals would be going away, as well as the human service workers are going away, and the new positions are the 7 wraparound services. But I don't know why I'm not seeing that 9. See, we're missing 10 and 11 on this. I don't know if that was something in the presentation. I just caught it on the fly. Let me draw your attention to, just so we're in your packet. Nope, we're not there. So there are 2 line items, and I will make sure that we get this corrected. So there's line 9, that's the Reach Associate, but we're also missing, I see on here, 10 and 11 lines. And I do believe that did include that does include the parent or the parent engagement professional. That will correct that. So that is missing from here, but I will make sure that is corrected in this proposal. The other thing then becomes the parent engagement coordinator. That position again would be reorganized from the parent engagement coordinator to the wraparound service coordinator. And then there would be direct supervision of the 7 wraparound service specialists. So what we've categorized here, color-coded, would be blue current positions organizationally, the ones that are in the yellow proposed position reorganizations, and then those positions that would be eliminated. In the last paragraph, I do want to just make you aware, as well as the public, Mr. Smith in Human Resources has met with every single employee today, has made some kind of either face-to-face or personal contact with them to let them know that this proposal was coming. As part of this process, if this is approved by the Board of Education, as we've done before, those positions will be immediately posted, and we will seek and encourage those individuals that we believe have the skill set, and we know they're here, to apply for those positions as well. And then Mr. Smith and his staff will work with them on any individual that's impacted to make sure that we take care of our own, and we make sure that we answer their questions, and we make sure that our job board, which is always active and supporting our employees, as we always do, as we change to a different delivery service model, which is basically that paragraph. I'm not going to get into all this. This is just basically who those new positions would report to, and that's all the curriculum coordinators. And then the last thing I'll draw to your attention, just like we've done every other time, everything else in here is every single job description, the new job descriptions that are proposed. These are drafts, and every time that we've done this, once we go through this process, we will post those if it's approved at the following board meeting. So as we open up for discussion, just to remind you of the process, tonight the superintendent is just simply recommending that you take action on this so it can go to LPPC and CPPC for 10 days. That's the next step in the process. I'll be working with Mr. Smith in setting those meetings up, if you agree to move it forward, and then we'll meet with those groups to go through all this, and then after that we will come back for then a final vote of the proposed reorganization. And that concludes our high-level overview. And we're happy to take any questions.
Well, just real quick, when are you proposing that we could get that other page to look at or to add in here?
As soon as
Okay, that's cool.
we change, we're gonna. I mean, you can see we're missing
Right.
10 and 11.
I was wondering. I was
And
like,
yep,
I can count.
I just want to make sure you get it. We will make sure that when we update that, one of the things that we'll do, we'll have Ms. Colquitt immediately post that to the public, and we'll make sure that you have that as well, because that does come back to, you know, and when you look at the end of that, and probably something that I glossed over, is this reorganization's projected district cost would be just over 1.2 million. The cost savings through this would be 1.4. And again, when we talk about, you know, from the first reorganization that was proposed, we knew once ESSER went away, we knew we were going to have to find some room in the budget to make sure that we support our instructional staff, and then, you know, reorganize some things that we knew that just weren't as aligned, certainly, as they could be. And I'll turn it over to my colleagues if there are any comments that Mr. Brown, Dr. Hooper, or Mr. Smith would like to make before we make any.
No question, statement.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Brown, I think the board, we was basically concerned. I do see that all the job descriptions are out here that are available to people that may not, let's say that, you know, in a position at this time, that they are out there and we're not closing our doors to anyone, and that we're not blaming too. People need to clear this. We're not saying anything negative about the LEARNS Act. We're just following the policy of the LEARNS Act and how the money should be spent and how the Title I, which is federal government, should be spent. Correct? Thank you.
Yes, and I think to your point, Ms. Williams, is that's why when we go through this as well, is it's important that we spend the time and write the job description ahead of time, so those employees that may be impacted know ahead of time what the qualifications are. What are we seeking in that? So they know ahead of time, even before it's even posted, so they can prepare. And that's just part of how we've been doing business when we reorganize, to be transparent about our data, about where we are, about organizationally, effectively, and we'll do everything we can to support our employees through this process, as we've always done.
Okay, thank you.
Well, my question is, I think we should be very clear that I've read the LEARNS Act a few times now, but the LEARNS Act is not recommending that we change this policy with MCLs or social workers, correct?
But that's not what I said. So what I
Well,
said.
when you presented it, you said because of the LEARNS Act,
So
we're doing this.
So one of the things that the LEARNS Act
Correct.
requires, so let me clarify that. So one of the things that the LEARNS Act requires that is heavy on is improving literacy. That is in the LEARNS Act. And we have a significant responsibility to improve literacy in the school district. The LEARNS Act says, specifically in the Right to Read Act, specifically that our children need to be reading by the end of K through 3, but we know we have a significant problem. I mean, that's just simply the law, number one. Number two, that's what we're tested on, and that's what we're held accountable to. And so the LEARNS Act does have an influence, for sure.
Yeah, but that's different than saying we're having to do this because of the LEARNS Act, because the LEARNS Act does not mention social workers in the school and MCLs, and they need to be transformed into other positions, and we need wraparound service positions. The LEARNS Act does not speak to that directly.
Well, the LEARNS Act doesn't get specifically on positions other than the simple fact of literacy coaches. So there is,
Correct.
in the LEARNS Act, talks about, within the Right to Read Act, all of that talks about literacy coaches. We have 4 literacy coaches that are assigned from the State Department that work in 6 of our schools, specifically in grades K through 3. That is part of the state's model of helping to improve instruction. Now, we know, now the LEARNS Act does not say anything about, let me take that back. Wraparound services, the LEARNS Act calls for a read-at-home plan. It also requires an individual reading plan for every single child. And so we know that there's a huge impact in connecting with our parents, not only about our parent conferences, engaging with our parents. So there is a big parent component to this, specifically about helping parents understand now I haven't seen the regulations on the Read at Home plan, but that is in the LEARNS Act about supporting our families
Sure.
at home. And so it's...
No, but my question was about this specifically is not in the LEARNS Act.
Well,
The social workers in schools, the MCL positions, transforming them is not specifically in the LEARNS Act.
Those specific positions, if you want to say, is there anywhere in the LEARNS Act that I've seen opportunity culture? I have not.
Okay.
And that was a model way before the LEARNS Act even got passed, way before I got here.
Sure. And then I said with Dr. Smith, so when I know I got several calls and I know other board members as well, then when we spoke to these individuals who have been impacted, these individuals who currently have these positions as social workers, MCL workers, then why were they told that we were doing this because of the LEARNS Act?
So my conversation with employees today was not because of the LEARNS Act.
You didn't mention that to any of them?
No, sir. I did not.
Would we be doing this, Mr. Superintendent, if the LEARNS Act was not the law of the state?
If we didn't have the LEARNS Act, I'd be recommending this. From day one, if you remember, from day one, even before the LEARNS Act, if you go back to the 100-day transition plan, one of the first things I talk about was there's 2 things that improve instruction in schools. Number one, the only individual that has the most direct impact to improve learning is the teacher. And the second that has the most influence on that is the principal. And all the way back to the single first reorganization, we talked about supporting principal and principal leadership. We talked about supporting classroom teachers, which is why we created the Division of Curriculum Instruction, which is why I said some of the reason, even which is backed by the curriculum management audit of why we're in some of the situation that we're in, because there's a lack of coordination of literacy in the district. There's a lack of systems and structures to help support teachers. Regardless of the LEARNS Act, I would recommend this proposal without that, because number one,
I would certainly feel better about that.
Well,
because it sounds like the LEARNS Act is what's invoking us to to consider taking these steps.
Well, but regardless, there's always an accountability measure, right? So that comes back to the law, and that comes back to the Every Student Succeeds Act. That's ESSA. We've had many conversations in my office.
Right.
I've got it all mapped out, how schools are graded, and one of the biggest areas in which they're graded upon is reading, is literacy. And so we have to put our resources in literacy. We have to put our resources in math. Those are tested areas. And then now science comes along, and now that's going to be tested area. They will get points towards their letter grade about how well students do on science. So I would be recommending this regardless, because number one, from the instructional standpoint, we've got to support teachers. And from the other side, which is the community that we live in, we know in our community that is not only one, extremely supportive, but we have significant needs. We have children, as we all know, that they're growing up by being raised by a sibling, by auntie, by their grandmother, and live in poverty. And that's real. And even though we can't change that, we can change how we service and we deliver support services to all of our families across all. And I know this is an area of passion that you and I get talking about, and how do we connect with our communities as presented. Right now, the model's disjointed. There's some schools that they don't. I mean, God, I would love to have a social worker in every single one of our schools. But if we can combine these positions and service more families and service more schools cohesively, because we know that kids come with, and it's not their fault, but they come to school with barriers because of whatever the situation is. And how do we further connect with those families that maybe we can help remove a barrier that we know might be impeding or impacting on their learning?
Mm-hmm. Good. So just quick question. How many positions are we adding, and how many will be eliminated? And since I don't want to misspeak and say one question, if Dr. Smith can answer the question, are the individuals who we have communicated with that may not be in the same position as MCLs or social workers, do they meet the qualifications of the new positions that's going to be advertised if this should pass?
I would say there would be an opportunity for any individuals that were affected under the newly reorganized positions to apply for those said positions. There would be a cross of experience and service that they have already performed within the North Little Rock School District that I would believe would be a huge consideration for individuals acquiring those positions.
I would say the same thing. Just to back off that is experience. I mean, we know that people in our school district that have lots of experience in that area, and they're doing a great job. Our pool of MCLs currently would be and is a phenomenal pool, and we want to encourage them to apply for these positions, just like our human service workers and our parent engagement. Yes, apply, and there's great work happening. It's just going to look a little bit different, and it's going to be coordinated a little bit better. But we want to encourage all those individuals to apply. That's why in every single one of these, Mr. Steele, to your point, gets to what the qualifications are. And I can't certainly speak to what the current qualifications were in the MCL, but I would have to believe that the folks that are impacted are highly qualified.
I can say this as well, too. With 3 reorganizations that we've performed at the North Little Rock School District since Dr. Paluski has begun, we've had an extremely high fill rate by those that have been affected by previous reorganizations, meaning that we fill positions that are reorganized with people that were serving in other positions.
I give you that. You did. You have done a good
And-
job, especially with the, Dr. Reyes, when we had the issue with the training of the weapons, and
Security.
you did hire a lot of those security.
Absolutely, our security
people back.
officers, yes, sir, our security officers.
So I give you that as a good job on that. So
some
if
of
this
our-
follows that trend, I think that several of these people will be just fine.
And some of our coordinators that have been, I think of Miss Edwards, Miss Higgins, they were some of our classroom teachers. So I just use them as examples of folks that applied for the job. I mean, we want to retain, our employees, but this is also a leadership pathway opportunity as well. And people have to see in any organization that there's a pathway that I want to improve. Maybe there's a classroom teacher out there, and this is an opportunity for them in their career growth. So it does provide that as well. Let me share this with you, but we'll keep taking questions.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, seeing all of this put together this way, it has surprised me. I didn't realize there were so many differences at
Okay, thank you.
at the different schools, and that I guess in 2018 there was an option whether they were going to have this position or not, and some of the schools chose not to. I like that this is going to now be touching every single school in our district, and I don't know who put all of this together and who worked. This is a lot of information and a lot of data.
It is, and I want to give Dr. Hooper credit. I want to give Mr. Smith credit. I want to give Mr. Brown credit. I want to give Dr. Nickerson credit and Miss Estes, who've done a lot of some of the heavy lifting here and detailed work. But I think by now when we come to you that we're going to come with a detailed and justifying why we believe this is a better path forward.
Well, this is definitely detailed, and I know we all do, appreciate the work that went into this, and also seeing the money situation and seeing how much we've been paying for the services that we were offering and where we can now save, I don't know what it was.
1.4 million.
1.4 million. So if there was a committee that said, how can the district save some money somewhere, that committee would be here cheering that on, I'm sure. But I'm really happy to see all the schools getting touched by this and these wraparound services, because we do need that at every single school building. We need the literacy. We need the math coaches. So it looks good. I know it's going to go to the LPPC.
And it'll go to CPPC because we have
CPPC.
CPPC employees as well that are impacted, and we'll meet with them and answer their questions just like we've always done.
And it'll be interesting to see their comments on this
Sure.
too. And right now it looks very good to me. And I understand the reasoning behind this, why this information was put together, to try to take the programs that we were offering kind of in varied formats at different schools and put it together in one, I'll use your word, cohesive
Yes, ma'am.
plan.
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you.
Okay. I just want to say first, Dr. Peluska, I appreciate the thoughts on the equity in all of our schools, that all the schools should have the same thing. And I never realized that there were not parentals in all the schools. That's one thought that I have. Because we say we're equal, but then we have schools that are being short. It's not fair. So I do want to say, I want to thank you, and I thank you that I hope people are listening. You're not out of a job if you're qualified for the job. And I don't see anything coming up so great that you would not reach out and do what you need to do. And I want to, and looking at this, and for years, Dr. P, I'm tell you being honest, I've been on the board for 17 years. It has always been a stipends problem. Not an issue, but just a problem because things were not done properly. giving it to those who really deserved it. And then was always a conflict. And I hope with this step that you have taken, we now can resolve some of this. Those who are supposed to get it need to have it, and those who don't, it's over. And so again, thank you, staff, Dr. Nichols, everybody. And as a board, I appreciate your hard work, your thoughts, but I'm so glad this too has passed, all of the stipends.
Well, real quick, Dr. Paluski, since we have this other one, did you want to go through?
Yep, sure.
Okay.
I'll be happy
And
to.
then I'll ask my questions after
Yep.
you have a chance to go through that and add that slide.
So
in there.
we will update our slide deck, but if you're in the presentation, so from page 23 in the presentation for the audience to page 24, the next page, you see that we're missing line 10 and line 11, correct?
Yes.
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 So what you have in front of you, line 10, are the 7 parent engagement professionals. They're all paid out of Title I. You can see what the dollar amount there is. They will be reorganized into from 7 parent engagement professionals to 7 wraparound service specialists. The funding there would be Title I and ESA, and then they would report to the coordinator of wraparound services. And in 11, there is 1 parent engagement professional that is paid out of Title I. That position would be eliminated. And then you have the 12 and 13. So you do have all the information. That the same number at the end, the projected cost as well as the projected savings, those numbers do not change. But we will immediately make sure that we get this corrected and we get it out to the public so that we're completely transparent on the entire plan.
Questions?
Yes. So I had a few thoughts as we were talking about this, going back to the grades or the scores that we had on towards the beginning of the slide. With that being said, I remember we at some point talked about like some of the testing grades, and we were supposed to have y'all McNulty to come back to present a little bit on that as far as like with the NWEA and what that looked like as far as like with the scores and all that.
So
Would that have played a part into this?
would that have played? So
Yes.
So one, and that gets into a whole other conversation
Okay.
about our assessment system,
Okay.
And our benchmarking system, and as it relates to our cumulative formative assessments, our DNA.
Right.
That's a whole nother, conversation. By law, we're required to come to you every single month with a data update. We did that at the last one, so we continue to do that. We'll
Right.
continue
What
to
I'm
provide
saying is
them.
specifically with those particular scores, is that factored in this particular letter grades? or
No,
what?
ma'am.
No, it's, okay.
If that's your question,
Yeah.
that's just local. That's just
Okay,
local
gotcha.
assessment.
Okay, gotcha.
That right there, and we could take a deep dive into, and we have done that before. We can go back to look at what makes up the index of a school grade. In fact, if you look at before this, Dr. Hooper was the one that wrote this. That gets into the specifics. That third paragraph that really talks about how, if you click on that, how the A through F letter grades are, how they're calculated. That hangs in my office. I'm happy to talk about that. But that does, when you look at the high areas where we go into growth, there's an attendance piece that's in there as well. That's in the whole school quality index. It looks different at elementary than it does in high school. High school graduation plays a rate. So there's a lot into unpacking that. But if your question is our local assessments, which I think your question is,
Yes.
our local assessments are just to help us in the improvement process of where kids are.
Okay.
And that's just part of the teaching and learning process.
Okay. And as far as the specialist, will they have the flexibility to navigate like their own schedules as far as say, for example, if they are Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, they're supposed to be like at whatever particular schools, and then Thursday and Friday, they're supposed to be at these particular schools. Would they have the autonomy or the flexibility to say, okay, well, maybe Ridge Road may need me more days this particular week, so I'm going to try to make it up over here, say like at Amboy on this particular week, or so. What would that look like?
Sure, and that's a whole coordinated effort. So we have what we call our ILT team, our instructional leadership team. That's school performance, that's curriculum. It's Dr. Hooper, myself, special education, Dr. Stoll. We're constantly looking at our schools and what our schools need. So in the model, and just like with coordinators, and Dr. Hooper's been on some recent, meetings with our curriculum coordinators about who needs to be spending time, and that's why we identify in blue. We've identified these schools as our priority campuses. The 5 that are there, there's 5 that are there. The reason they're priority is they're in a level of state school improvement. We've met with the state. So that's why our CHIPS, if you will, the time that we have to spend, the majority of our time has to be in high leverage, high priority campus schools, but we also can't leave our other schools because we know that they need support. So right now, you've got Miss Chris and Miss Langston are covering that by themselves, working with schools as well. If we increase that, now we've got more Miss Chris's and Miss Langstons out. Just like what we do in anything is we monitor our data on a constant basis, and if we have to change support from one campus to another, we do that almost on a weekly basis. Do we need to shift some resources here? Do we need to pull back some resources here? So that will just be a whole coordinated effort with all of us working on the same page based upon the needs of, and there's a line in there that I wrote, I believe, if you want to get back to it, it's in probably the last sentence. If you read that last sentence that I wrote, instructional specialists' schedules and school assignments may change at any time based on quantitative and qualitative data points and the needs of an individual school. And that's just us coordinating, making sure that, hey, 4th grade at this school might need some support based upon what we're looking at with their principal and their data.
Okay, and then as far as with the state supplementing some monies or some dollars there, as far as like with some of those positions, how long, or have you heard of how long that's guaranteed for? Like, what would that look like as far as the state supplementing that money?
So,
and then also that supplementation going, bringing those other people up to the $50,000 range.
Okay, I wasn't sure where your question was, if it was the 4 literacy coaches that are assigned to the North Little Rock School District, if that was your question, or is your question the 50,000?
A little bit of both.
Okay, so right now we're assigned 4 literacy coaches by the state. I don't know if they've put a time frame on, how long we're going to get them, but based upon the needs of our schools, I would think that, and we need them, and they're doing some great work with us. I don't see that support going away anytime soon. The second side of your question, if it's the $50,000 and the sustainability, and I know and I know Mr. Steele, you're in our legislative liaison. I know they're in the
Starts Wednesday.
Wednesday,
Fiscal session.
and if you probably have more information than any of us about where they are in funding, continuing to fund that.
That's going to be one of the top priorities, so we'll know in a few days, a few weeks.
And I had heard, from the beginning, I think was just a question around the Learns Act is, could that be sustainable? And so, but our direction, Mr. Brown, if I'm not mistaken, from ADE is we're planning as if we're getting it.
Okay.
Until otherwise told differently.
Yeah.
Mr.
Sure.
Stewart,
Well, our Budget Stabilization Act requires us to fund education. So once the bill is passed, we got to fund it. Other things may be cut, but education will be fully funded.
I got you. Thank you.
And this kind of, this whole talk with all of this tonight and looking at where we need to save money, it just kind of, maybe this may be a conversation for later, but, as far as what do we have, let me see how I want to say this. what do we have as far as consultants, as far as the district? Do we currently have like consultants that are
We do.
helping with some of this
We do.
stuff? And,
We do. We use
will
consultants
will
in different
any of those
areas.
consultants be able to help support some of this, as far as if, say, like maybe somebody may be out for extenuating circumstances? Is that like the purpose of some of them, like to help support in those areas?
Sure, we use consultants in different areas. In fact, in the last board meeting during the consent agenda, you had approved some of the consultants that we use. I think of Dr. Snow as an example, which is an award-winning principal. He's supplementing, working with some of our high-need school principals and giving them extra coaching and extra support.
Okay, good.
I'll just give you that as an example.
Right, yeah, and and that's just kind of a thought that popped up in my
Yeah.
head, like make sure that we are utilizing
Yeah.
each and every resource, if you will.
Sure.
And I firmly believe that, our current PEPs and our campuses are essential, they're needed. We need sometimes way more of them at one time.
For sure.
Because we just have a population that we just have to make sure that we're there for, or else
Sure.
we wouldn't be collecting prom dresses, backpacks, and school supplies.
Yes, ma'am.
So that it just is what it is, and it's
Sure.
the nature of the beast. So
Sure.
thank you. That's all I have.
Yes,
That
ma'am.
wasn't enough.
Dr. Redis?
Almost forgot my question. It's to probably Dr. Smith. Let's say I apply for a position. What's going to be approximately the turnaround to fill the positions? Basically, will they be filled before the school year? If I'm in a position like we did with security, they knew before the year was over who was going to get the positions and come back. Is this going to be the same way?
So it will be our goal to work through this process. As Dr. Paluski communicated tonight, the superintendent's going to ask the board to send to the LPPC and CPPC. With that being said, that could either be, we could have a meeting. I have a regularly scheduled meeting on Tuesday with the CPPC. LPPC just had their meeting, but I will be making a call either this evening or tomorrow to see if we can get something early in the week.
Yes.
If these are approved early next week, this could come as early back to the board for final approval next Thursday at a special meeting we have scheduled that the board has a quorum for. And so if that's the case, then that would be as quick of a turnaround as we could see. Then with our own processes and procedures, we put the positions out with the job descriptions that the PPCs and the board would approve. We would run those for 10 days. We would probably send something out from my office communicating to everybody that those positions are now up, so anybody interested would be able to apply. Absolutely. And then from there, as soon as the positions close, we would go through our hiring process with our committees, try to get those done as quickly as possible. And the ultimate goal, and I've had this conversation with Dr. Paluski, would be to provide our employees as much security as possible through this process so that we could get them in positions that they are qualified for and the top candidates for, to let everybody to be transparent and so they know.
Thank you.
ASAP.
The other is just a comment. I just want to say thank you to everybody who, this was a lot of data, this was a lot of work. So thank you to everybody that played a part to put this together. I am, like Ms. McClain said, I am like ecstatic to see that every school will have wraparound services through this plan, rather than, some schools and borrowing from the other school, and just that, because all of our schools need services, regardless if you are an A or an F. All of our schools need services. So I'm happy to see that. And for any of the affected staff that are listening, I just encourage you, get your resumes together and apply.
Ms. Temple.
And I just wanted to circle back around what Mr. Steele said about the LEARNS Act. What I heard you say was, with the increase in the base pay, the finances in that situation had to be looked at. So I just wanted to
Sure.
clarify that,
Sure,
that the
sure.
LEARNS Act impacted the finances in that funding source.
Sure, and well, and that is a fact that within finance in Title I, that money could not be used to supplement those salaries in the title. So, but there's lots of factors. That would be one, right? The second factor that then the beginning factor when I talked about it from the beginning is in that first reorganization was ESSER's going away, and we need to make room for our curriculum coordinators that are highly valued and working. We got to bring, since that goes away, and we knew through these funding sources that we had to look at it anyways. We also had another lens to look at it, that the LEARNS Act wasn't supplementing on the finance side. Those, we had to find it from within that budget.
Okay. And then the only other thing I'd like to say is, I know from personal experiencing what a shock it is when you get information like this. It's, you know, it's just hard to process, and it's hard for us as a board to make decisions. But we appreciate you, all the work you put in, but we really are focused on the future for our students, and it's hard. It's hard. People lose sleep over these decisions, and again, encourage you to please apply. You may feel unvalued, but you're not unvalued. This is something that really needs to be done for our students, and we have made progress. I can tell you, we went to Lakewood Wednesday, and I walked down the kindergarten hall, and there was, you know, the kindergarten had written about sharks, and
It did.
it looked like first grade work. And you know, and then I went over and looked at the first grade, and it looked like second grade work, and I was like, we are making progress. We really are. And, you know, it's going to be a long process, and I'm really, really sorry for the people it's impacted. But I want to say we appreciate all you've done, and please apply.
May I say one more thing?
Sure.
So I met with all of our employees today, or made contact in regards to the individuals that were affected. And speaking off of what Ms. Temple just said, I just want to thank all of our employees. There was a level of grace and poise shown at every level and at every building. And while there were things that were communicated at times, and there were different responses, as Ms. Temple communicated, everybody showed a level of grace and poise that I truly appreciate from my position. It's not an easy conversation to hear, and it's not an easy conversation to have, but we want to be transparent as a district, and we want to communicate with our employees, and I hope everyone is receiving the message. And so, thank you.
I would like to make a statement in your, not your defense, but one person called me, and they said, Ms. Williams, I'm not employed anymore, but Mr. Smith explained it to me. He said simply, it was the budget. And you told them that they could come to the board. You know, that look at the board meeting, and I want to commend you on that effort, because nobody brought anything else up but your statement. You said it budget and come to the meeting or whatever. And so I heard nothing else beyond that line, Mr. Smith, and that is correct, that you simply said the budget when they asked you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
If you don't mind, Madam President, real quick, I just want to just make a comment and to jog memories. I remember when I first got on the board, and I remember your first year here, that you put out something called a 100-day transition plan. I read it, and I reread it, and I reread it. And I realized that after one comes two, and after two comes three. And here we are, what, at 4?
Phase 4, yes, ma'am.
So we kind of knew that every so often departments or topics were going to be revisited, and change happens. So, you know, we just encourage everybody every day when it comes to our children, our most precious commodities, to make sure that we do our very best every day, because after the number 4 comes maybe a 5. So we all have to make sure that we're in position to be ready to give our best and put our best foot forward every day. And we also knew too, with the temporary ESSER money that we were getting, we knew that that was going to go away. And we knew that, because I remember a conversation that we had a long time ago, that at that point we would have to revisit the subject and have those hard conversations.
Yes, ma'am.
So here we are in 2024, 4 years later, we're having those hard conversations from what you said 4 years ago.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation of the North Little Rock School District Instructional and Wraparound Services Support Reorganization Plan Proposal, Phase 4, as presented in open session, and to send it to the LPPC and CPPC for 10 days.
Second.
It's moved and properly second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Madam President, members of our Board of Education.
Okay. What we have next is public comments, and I think we have, Amy,
One.
you have something to say to us?
You sit, do wherever you feel
Yeah,
comfortable.
you can sit right there.
I'll just hold the microphone right here. All right. Hello, members of the board and Dr. Paluski. My name is Amy Friedman. I very much dislike
Wait a
the
minute, hang on one second. She's got
sorry.
it.
I didn't start
Sorry.
the clock. I'm sorry. Hold
Can I
just
start
a
over
second.
from
Yeah.
the very
Yes,
beginning?
ma'am.
Okay.
Because she has started time, so you can
Okay.
start
I
over.
started time.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go.
Sorry about that.
Hello, members of the board and Dr. Paluski. My name is Amy Friedman. I very much dislike the public comments being held at the end of this meeting. It gives the perception that you do not care about your parents' opinions, and what is being said falls on deaf ears. I feel like what I'm going to say is falling on deaf ears, but I must say it. At the beginning of the school year, I approached the school board concerned with the amount of teachers leaving the school district and how they were being treated. Some of you seemed shocked, unaware, or nonchalant. Some of you took an interest. Today, MCLs and coaches across the district were led into an office, read a script, and were laid off, fired. This is what I'm talking about. This is how we treat our teachers who have poured their hearts and souls into our school district. We are talking about some amazing, talented, kind, and compassionate teachers. In other words, the best. Many of these teachers were encouraged to take these positions. Some of these teachers have even been your North Little Rock School District Teachers of the Years. Some of these teachers are my family. This was a slap in the face, a stab in the back, and a heartbreak. Now, they can reapply, but who would want to after being treated like that? Reapplying means they could lose their schools, lose their job title, and possibly lose money. And why make them reapply? Don't you know what they are capable of? Furthermore, who would want to go back to work for a school district who blindsided them? Here is a solution. Let current MCLs and coaches fill the new openings first. Then, if the current coaches and MCLs decide to turn down those openings, then open it up to the public. You have the power to make this happen. You have the power to make this wrong right. I feel this could have been handled with so much more dignity and grace. You negatively affected dozens of lives today, and not just those of the teachers. I urge you to think about the people behind those decisions, not just the numbers and restructuring. Reach out to those who have lost their job. Offer an I'm sorry. I am so disappointed in the school district. Thank you.
There's no more public comments, so we can
I
move to
move that we
adjourn.
adjourn and go to workship.
Second.
Yes, can I ask a question? Yeah, when and why did we go to public comment at the end of the meetings? When was that done?
We discussed it
We discussed it
a
for
minute
couple
ago,
times.
when, a
7
couple of
months ago.
meetings that you missed.
I mean,
After we came
what was the
from the board
rationale for it?
The last board meeting.
We had to, I had to go back and look at my notes, but I'm not prepared to answer that right now, but
It
I
was-
have to go back and look at my notes.
It was after the last meeting that we had at the convention center,
It was back in
Oh, yeah,
December.
that's right.
December.
Yeah.
And
December.
that's what it was suggested.
Yeah, it just
at the
seems,
conference.
I mean,
Well, I can say from my point of view, I sat here at one meeting, we had a bunch of middle school kids in here, and some of the people who spoke in such a way that the kids looked horrified. They were looking around like, what is going on? They looked scared. It was very disruptive, and I thought, we have these people that we're trying to honor, and these kids are sitting in here and they're hearing things that they're old enough to understand some of it, but not old enough to really understand all of it. And it just seemed very unproductive to what we were trying to accomplish. But we don't want to not have public comments, because I
Yeah.
think it's important to hear from people. But, I mean,
I appreciate that. That makes sense, and that is the legitimate reason. I've heard some unkind things said here, but maybe it should be a happy medium where we do everything we need to do while the kids are here, and then once the kids leave. Because if you have a public comment on something that's on the agenda and we already vote on it, what's the
We
I'm
can
like
always
this.
amend
if you
the-
already vote
Well,
on
you
it?
can amend a meeting, like you can amend whatever you have voted on, like even the next meeting. You can have a conversation about that later if it's something that we need to discuss further. You can always go back and amend whatever it is that you've done.
I'm just like this. If it's important enough for them to say, they can stay to the end and say it. That's my opinion. And if it's that important to them, because it changed the environment of our meetings, like,
Okay.
it's just something about it. When people come up to that microphone negative, not positive, they can't even be pleasant when they talk. So my attitude is, we're still giving them a privilege at the end of the meeting.
well, may I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Let's put it on the agenda for discussion, because there
Okay.
may be a happy medium where we could do it
Maybe a retreat or something?
midway in, but
Okay,
I still think
fair.
that,
That's
we
fair.
need to consider the students that are in the room.
I do too. I've seen us have elementary students in here,
And some
and
nasty
some people
individuals.
get up and say some comments, and I'm like, I don't think that should be said in front of those little
A lot of
elementary kids that are
inappropriate
here, that are
comments.
happy. Their parents are happy that they're here because they're performing at the board meeting, and we still want to have public comments. So I know that there are other boards that have them at different times too.
They don't have them at all.
Don't have
Yeah, there are
Yes.
some boards that don't have
That
any
don't have 'em at
At the
public
conference
comments
we went to,
whatsoever.
they
North
were
Rock
not
School
having,
District
they
is-
they canceled them altogether.
Altogether.
Right,
But-
North Rock School District, I think we're one of
We've
the
all-
few
A
Yep.
few,
who actually have public comments.
Yep.
And we say, because we feel that what the community has to say is important to us, they should be heard. So we refused to go that route when it was presented to us, because even our Arkansas School Board Association asked us, why
Why
are
are
you
we
all
still
still
doing it?
having it? But we care. That's
And
why.
it was also said that was the dumbest thing ever, that we were still having public comments. And that came
Okay.
from Arkansas School Board. But let me say this real quick.
I will never
But-
serve in a position
Hang on,
of
hang on real
elected
quick,
official
Cindy, real
without
quick. But
public
this is-
comment.
Well, that's
to me-
fine. However, that's just
That's-
what was suggested. However, it's important for people to get it off their chest if that's what they feel. But, I'm real big on making sure that you're appropriate in front of children, and sometimes we have had
Okay.
inappropriate comments
Yeah.
in front of children, and so,
we can circle back around and talk about this, but let's go on to our workshop.
Did we so move to adjourn from this one?
We
We
did.
did. All in
Okay.
favor? Aye. Okay, none opposed. We're in the workshop.
Dr.
Okay.
Harmon.
Find my schedule here.
She's
So, speaking of science, and speaking of science and being a tested area, our first information item is the total eclipse update. And so we know that come Monday, schools are going to be closed, our central office is going to be closed, we're going to be working remotely. Dr. Harbin is no stranger to our school board, but we thought that it would be a good idea for a couple minutes just to give her an opportunity and the public about this very special scientific event that's getting ready to happen. Dr. Harbin, welcome.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Paluski. I'm really excited to be here. I started my day at 7:30 this morning at the Hall of Industry, where we had our totality STEM. That's all 4 Central Arkansas school districts. Jacksonville, North Pulaski, North Little Rock, and Pulaski County Special School District came together. We've been planning 7 months to plan this event, and we had 4,000 students. 5th graders from all 4 districts came, and they got to hear 3 fantastic speakers. Do we have the clicker?
You know what? I did.
So we had 3 fantastic speakers, Dr. Horton, who is a NASA scientist from New Orleans, Dr. Chris Jones, who is an MIT grad and an advocate for public education, and then Elizabeth Wheatley, that's the innovation, right here in the Innovation Hub. And they each spoke about the importance of STEM, and then science, and then art, and kind of how the eclipse is impacting us as a community. So we had 4,000 5th graders there. We had high school volunteers from all 4 districts that were ambassadors. They kind of worked with shuttling, security, food, getting the speakers to where they needed to be. We had representatives from elementary schools and the 7-8 campus that had projects on display for public to see, and so it was a great day. So we were saying 4 totality because it's 4 districts, 4,000 5th graders, and then about 40,000 total students were impacted from this event that we had. We had lots of sponsors. Arkansas STEM Coalition provided every public school student and teacher in the state of Arkansas with eclipse glasses. And then last week, I got a call from North Little Rock Tourism, and they donated $17,000. And so everybody has a stack on your desk, so give them to your mail person,
Thank you.
your friends, your neighbors, all your family members, and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to safely view the eclipse as it's coming up. So, just a little bit about this eclipse. Do you remember maybe back in high school when you were learning about X and Y axis and degrees and angles and things like that, and thinking, how does this ever apply to the real world? Well, we have an example of that phenomenon that's happening on Monday. What we have is an alignment of space-time and mathematical geometry, symmetry, that allows us to have the phenomenon that we're going to get to view here in Arkansas. So we have what's called a total solar eclipse. Total solar eclipses are, so just for perspective, I've never experienced one in my life because they're localized. So depending on where you are on the planet at certain times of the year is where you can see them. The next one that we will have here in Arkansas is in 2045. So think about how old you'll be in 21 years. And so, it is it's a pretty big, big event for our students. And so what happens is we have perfect alignment of the sun, the moon, and the earth. And so, pop quiz for you all. How long does it take the moon to travel around the earth?
2 minutes.
The moon to travel around the earth.
Yes.
For real?
It takes a total of 24 hours, right?
30 days. 30 days. And
You were
then
close.
how long does it take the earth to travel around the sun?
A year.
A year, 365. And so none of those things are moving in parallel orbits. They're all moving in different angles and different planes. And so to have the alignment that we're going to have on Monday the 8th is pretty phenomenal. So my goal, there was a joke, I wanted to keep this brief. We're going to have about 3 minutes and 52 seconds of totality here in North Little Rock, so I wanted to make this 3 minutes and 52 seconds long. But it's of all of those things to come together in that time and for us to be here and experience it together with the people that it's really a special event. And so, you know, one way that we really try to make science more equitable is utilizing local phenomenon, and nothing is better than an eclipse to be a phenomenon to be studied. So part of the districts that we work together is we created curriculum. So on the website, I'll show everyone how to get there soon. There's activities for families to do together on the day of the eclipse, and kind of go through some of those things too. So eclipses actually occur quite often. About 2 times a year. We had one recently in October. If you remember, it was called an annular eclipse. It was just a partial. It was during the day. It really didn't get too dark outside. Most people, we were standing in the parking lot at Lowe's looking at the sun, and most people weren't even paying attention. So that one really isn't as a spectacular of event as what we're going to see on the 8th. It's only visible on a small area, or so you've seen the path of totality. You've got the map that kind of goes through Arkansas and travels up north. And then, so the big thing is, what you'll see happen is the moon will slowly move across, and it'll look like the moon is kind of taking a bite out of the sun, and then it'll move across, create a crescent, and then we'll have full totality. So totality in some places can last as long as 7 minutes. Like I said, we're going to have about 4 minutes of totality here. And the thing that's spectacular about the totality is that you have an opportunity to kind of see the corona. And so if you look at this picture, you can see the layer of gas that surrounds the sun is normally not visible to us just because of the light that the sun emits. But that gives us some insight into what's going on, some of the reactions. Satellites are going to be able to take images, and we get to learn more about the chemistry and things that are going on with the sun. And there's also, this is something that I'm really interested in, there's going to be stars that are normally not visible because of the brightness of the sun that we may be able to see at that time. So it provides a lot of opportunity for things to happen. I know Ms. Williams and I were talking before about the diamond ring effect, how you see when the moon starts to pass, continue passing, you see what looks like a diamond ring, and then the Bailey's beads, which are named because the moon's surface it's not smooth, it has craters. So those beads that kind of create different radiance of light are supposed to be really beautiful. So there's a lot of science that goes into it, and it's a really cool event. So on the 8th, like I said, there's a lot of opportunity for citizen scientists. So we think about temperature changes, so parents and families can use an app on their phone and monitor temperature changes throughout the day. Also asking to observe wildlife. So do you notice any changes in the birds or squirrels? Do you see how do your pets react? So these are all things that we can be observing and report that data back as citizen scientists to kind of help further research. Also, if anyone has telescopes or long, fancy photography, those are also opportunities to capture art, which can also be very prized. And there's a lot of people who prize eclipse art. So on our website, if you go to the home page, you see here, there is a button that says Totality STEM Eclipse 2024. We have activities listed by grade level, and then we have a whole bunch of links for families. We have all the safety information that families need to be aware of. Taking pictures with your phone. You might want to read up on that before actually doing that. And there are some ways. Yes. So all that information can be found. There's also an interactive map. But it's a great opportunity to experience a local phenomenon that's actually a quite phenomenal phenomenon. And just really excited to be a part of it. On the eclipse classes that you have, North Little Rock has their own kind of website that they've created with events and updates throughout the day. So be sure to make.
Is that what the QR code? Okay,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, and it's on the glasses too. Okay. Yes, and it'll take you to that page, and it has all the things to kind of prepare for that day. And then I created little models for you all, just because of time. We're not gonna have time to go through all of these, but I'm gonna give you each this model kit, and then I'll send the instructions, and then you can go home and make 3-dimensional models of the eclipse and show everyone how hard it is to have that perfect alignment. So, so thank you. It was short and sweet, but I appreciate your time and looking forward to hearing about our kids' experiences during the eclipse.
Thanks.
This is going to be fun.
I enjoyed that.
Just So, Mr. Brown, was 2017, that wasn't total eclipse?
The previous one,
It was total eclipse.
2017.
Okay, I remember, yeah.
yeah. It was partial. I don't think it.
It was partial.
I think it was. I don't know for sure, but I think it was.
This
it
is
was
gonna make me
2017.
get my son's old telescope out the storage room.
We'll be
Be
using
careful.
that.
Oh yeah, that's right. We gotta have the glasses. Yeah, that's right.
But there's information on the website.
Yeah, gotta go to the website. We wanna be able to see the next day.
All right, so we're on to budget.
Yes.
Thank you.
Madam President, members of the board, we are continuing our budget workshop. I talked to Dr. Paluski, and he asked me to keep these to about 30 minutes or less. So I've got some items that we're going to talk about here tonight. We'll probably not spend 30 minutes on it.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay. But there are a couple of things that when we initially went through the budget workshop at the first of the year, there were some things at the end that we didn't get to spend a lot of time on that I want to touch base on. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was the financial management principles that are we have displayed on the screen. Now, these are principles that are developed by the Arkansas Department of Education, and they were developed over the course of a year and a half, and they had input from practitioners from across the state, and they were available. They're available on the website for support of school districts. So the first principle is called physical planning. The second principle is physical accounting. Third principle is internal controls. Fourth principle is fund balances. The fifth is the superintendent. And the sixth is the local board responsibility. So there are financial management principles developed by the state of Arkansas that impact my department and the operation of schools, and also the responsibility affects the responsibilities of the superintendent and local board. So I thought we would just take a look at these and go through them and see how they impact. So principle one is the district creates an annual budget to guide spending throughout the year. And that's what we present to you each September. And you see the expectations there. They expect us to do a needs assessment, to talk to our principals, directors, take into account the strategic plan of the board, the superintendent, the goals of the school district. 1B is enrollment trends. That has to be considered in the financial planning because the number of students that you have directly affects your funding. Staffing is analyzed and adjusted annually. We have to do that to keep our budget in line and to make sure we're addressing our standards of accreditation. And that if the enrollment trend goes up, that may necessitate an increase in staffing. If the enrollment trend goes down, that may
Get it together, man.
Yeah, I know.
Long day.
That may require a reduction in staffing. So those items, those expectations, all are in the fiscal one planning. There's also the district creates an annual budget to guide spending throughout the year. Additional expectation revenue and expenditures are budgeted appropriately, which we do in the budgeting process. Salary expenditures meet the state requirements. Budgeting and expenditure requirements are met. There's certain ADE establishes budgeting criteria, especially within the federal funds and the state and categorical funds that we're required to adhere to. My office handles that. Also, federal fund applications and budgets adhere to timeline and expenditure requirements. So you hear us say funds expire at a certain time. We have to have those spent. ESSER is one that we've talked about tonight. That funding has to be encumbered by September 30th. So the last time that we can create a purchase order to expend ESSER funding will be September 30th of 2024. Then we have until December the 31st to actually cut the check and liquidate the funds. So December 31st would be the last day to actually expend that funding. Principle 2, fiscal accounting. The district expends funds appropriately and maintains detailed documentation. And again, most of that requirement falls back to my office. We have general operational expenditures to make sure that they do not exceed current year revenues. That's always a bad thing when your expenses exceed revenues. So we monitor that, and of course, we prepare for that in our budgeting process. Expenditures are incurred for business-related activities. So we're always, my office monitors that. When a purchase order comes through, we make sure there's a clear educational need for that expenditure. We have 2C, clear itemized documentation is maintained for all expenditures. We do that. We have purchase orders created. We have documents that are attached electronically to those purchase orders, as well as the accounts payable check that has that expenditure. Salary and benefits paid to employees align with the district salary schedules. And again, we audit that internally, but also auditors, when they come, they select samples of employees that are paid. They check contracts. They check alignment with salary schedules to make sure those adhere to the salary schedules. Fiscal accounting, 2E, procurement laws and policies are followed. We have procurement laws on the books in the state of Arkansas, and we have policies in our district, and we make sure that we follow those laws and policies. Activity funds are clearly defined and used only for the purposes for which they're established. And activity funds, if you recall from your board report, they start with a number 7 on our board report. Those are called activity funds, and there's a specific established purpose for those funds, and we make sure that the expenditures for those are appropriate. The federal funds must be necessary and reasonable in accordance with program requirements. So that's another aspect that's controlled through my office, specifically through Ms. Estes's office, is all federal fund expenditures have to meet the necessary and reasonable requirement for being an approved expenditure. Principle 3 is internal controls. The district has established procedures and controls to ensure financial transactions are conducted properly. And 3A is the district has a systemic plan to identify areas of high risk. We do that. The auditors have, if you all recall, one of the high risk areas in this past audit was ESSER, because of the amount of funding that is pumped through the public school through the federal government. We have those processes in place. The district has written internal controls that are implemented. We have, I'm just telling you, every district I've been involved with except North Little Rock on our audit always gets cited for insufficient internal controls. And at North Little Rock, we've never been cited for insufficient internal controls. And it's because we have the staffing to be able to make sure that an expenditure from the beginning to the end is handled by multiple people and approved at multiple levels to make sure that there are processes in place to make sure expenditures are appropriate and that fraud is mitigated in those. So at a building level, we have a secretary that gets a quote, or we have an employee that may get a quote. Secretary may do a purchase order, introduce that purchase order. The principal is going to approve it. Then it moves on to a secondary or a secondary approval, which would be school performance, whether it's elementary or secondary. Then it moves on. If it's a federal fund, it moves through the federal programs where it gets approved. And then finally my office approves it. And then my office cuts the check for the expenditure. So you can count the number of people that are involved in an actual expenditure. It's not Brian Brown creating a purchase order that gets a check cut and gets mailed to a vendor. There are multiple people involved and multiple approvals involved that help us on that internal control responsibility. And we do a very good job at that in this district. The district also, 3C, ensures appropriate staff receive financial training. We conduct that training annually. Dr. Paluski and I are required to get what's called Tier 1 training annually. We participate in that. Then our other district employees that have access to purchase orders and budgeting funds have access to scheduling the budgeting funds get Tier 2 training, and that's conducted here annually. The district, 3D, the district is organized and prepared for a financial audit. And we get better each year, but this year the auditors were actually on site for less than 6 business days. They collect a lot of data from us before they get here. They collect a lot of data from us when they are here on site, and then they take all that back and they collect data from us once they leave. They're still asking for information. But the last 2 years, the auditors have been here for 10 days or less, and this year was our shortest amount of time, which was 6 days on site. So it's just a shout out to my department on being organized, preparing, and having everything ready for the auditors. Fund balances is principle 4. You see 4A says at the close of fiscal year, the district's net legal balance does not exceed 20% of the current year net legal revenue. If you recall, about 4 years ago, I believe, there was a new law passed that limited your net legal balance of being no more than 20% of the current year net legal revenues. And so we passed a policy to that effect that we would not exceed to comply with the state law. But we also monitor that, and we do our transfer. If you recall, we do our transfer to balance our budget back to our net legal balance back to $12.8 million at the end of each fiscal year. So your actions as a board take care of that 4A. 4B, sufficient cash resources are maintained to support the current projected obligations. We've not had cash flow problems, and we do our net legal balance projection worksheets for the board each month, which projects our cash flow on that worksheet. So we're in good shape there. By the close of the fiscal year, the minimum amount of funds as outlined in rule or legislation have been expended. So if we're over the 20% carryover, we have to either transfer those to the building fund or expend those. And then there's additional regulations in the federal budgets that limit the amount of carryover you can have in each of those funds. For instance, Title I is 15% carryover. We have to expend 85% of those funds. So we are sufficient in those. Principle 5 is the superintendent, and the superintendent has financial responsibilities. He's expected to be knowledgeable of the purpose and allowable use of all funds. Our superintendent is very knowledgeable about what is allowable, what's not, and he has my office to lean on if he needs additional information. Superintendent is knowledgeable of how revenue is generated and maintained, and he's well aware of that student enrollment drives revenue for almost all funds. The superintendent monitors expenditures and fund balances at least on a monthly basis, and we run all of our bank reconciliation reports and board reports through his office, and he monitors and signs those on a monthly basis. And the district superintendent also monitors contracts that are outside the district with outside vendors. And we have a standing rule that Dr. Paluski or myself are the only ones that sign outside contracts. So the ones I sign, he's aware of those. Additionally, superintendent or designee provides official monthly reports to the school board. You have a financial section in the board report. Those are provided to you. Superintendent develops and implements a corrective action plan if we have audit findings. We've not had audit findings in the last few years. So financial reports are submitted accurately to the Division of Education. That's handled through my office. As a superintendent, he's responsible for making sure those are coordinated and submitted. Local board responsibility. The local board, your responsibility as a board is to approve the budget of expenditures and receipts. So expenditures and revenues, you all do that each September. You also review and approve financial policies annually as needed. The local board also reviews the results of the annual audit. You just approve that at your last board meeting, and then all members of the school board attend training annually as required by law, including training that where they talk to you about understanding and interpreting audit report findings. So that is the, so Mr. Riddle, if we could exit this screen.
And I just want to say real quick, we had to try to look for it, but it's in the budget book slide all the way at the very end. It's a link at the very end.
That's correct.
To get
On the last
yeah, on the
page.
last page. I was kind of trying to, oh, where is he looking? But it's at the last page under financial management principle ADE link.
Okay, and Mr. Riddle, if you'll pull up the March projection worksheet. Yes, thank you, and we'll take a look at this. So this is one of the worksheets that's included in your monthly board packet, and I wanted to take a look at this for just a moment. This will be the last item we cover for tonight, but I'd like to just review for you how to look at this and how to interpret it, so that this could be something that you look at monthly and it has meaning to you, okay? So if you'll notice, this is what we call the net legal worksheet, okay? This is just for funds 1, 2, and 4. This is what makes up what we call our net legal balance, and we deal with that each year in June when you all approve the transfer to the building funds, the funds in excess of $12.8 million. So what we do is each month we update this spreadsheet. So at the beginning in July, we have projections for the entire year, July through June, what we're projecting, and then as each month closes and we can get actual figures, we actually come back and we update this actual figure each month. So if you'll look in at the format of this, the horizontal lines are your revenue lines. So the top part of the report are revenue. The bottom part of the horizontal lines are expenditures. And those are categorized by different accounts. So in the revenue part in the top, you have local taxes, you have other revenue, you have foundation funding, you have state aid. In the expenditures, you have salary and benefits, you have debt service, you have debt payments, you have transfers to the building fund. So all of those lines we populate each month into this worksheet. So if you'll notice, this is actually the one that was loaded into your March meeting. So if you'll notice at the very top of each month, so in the first column where it says July, now that has the word actual at the top of it. In August, it has actual. So all the way out through the month of February. So in March, in your March packet, we're able to give you actual numbers all the way through the month of February. So these numbers all the way through the month of February are actual, and then for March, April, May, and June, you see the word projected at the top. Those months obviously haven't happened, but we're making projections based on expenditure and revenue trends that we have experience with. We're making those projections. So you have totals at the bottom of this line, at this page. So the vertical totals at the bottom are by month. The totals at the right are by horizontal. So those are year to date and projected in the horizontal lines. And then the most important part of this worksheet is down in the bottom right, where you see the 12.8 million. So the number right above it, the I can't read that from here, 24.9 or 8 million. And then right underneath it, it says 12.8 million. And then the double line there is 12.1 million. So what if you'll recall, our goal has been to have 12.8 million as our net legal balance at the end of each fiscal year. So what this does is works up. We take our funding, we work to the 24.9 million, which would be the cash on hand in our net legal funds at the end of this fiscal year, and we subtract out what our balance is. So right now it's 12.8 million. I'll be talking to you about at the end of this year about increasing that amount So we've not increased that amount over a period of several years since 2011, when we were in fiscal distress with the state, and the state had recommended the 12.8. So we may be, I will be coming to you talking about, well, let's talk about raising that bar from 12.8 to 3.2, something like that, where we can show a little bit of growth on our retention of our net legal balance. But so the difference, the 12.1 million, right now is our projected revenue that we are projected funds that we would be able to transfer to the building fund at the end of this fiscal year. So the 12.1 million, if you recall, that normally is not that large, but that is that large because of the refinance that we did on our bonded debt back during COVID. And so we had those, took advantage of those low interest rates. Mr. Beardsley front-ended our savings so that we could have some savings in anticipation of having a middle school project. So every dollar that we have here that's over the 12.8 will transfer to the building fund. That becomes money available in our building fund for those projects. So this is the, so, you know, whenever I look at this, after we get through, I look at this and I would say from a board member standpoint, just look at the bottom right and what you can keep an eye on that on a monthly basis. Just say, okay, right now we're projecting 12. So that number fluctuates. It will fluctuate as we have different expenditures that happen throughout the year. But you can see and watch that as we trend through the end of the fiscal year. But again, I just wanted to call this to your attention. It's an important worksheet, has lots of information there for you, and it's something that just easily you can look at that and get a good, now this worksheet does not take into account federal funds, so anything that's Fund 6. It does not take into account child nutrition, which is Fund 8, and it does not take into account our activity funds, which are Fund 7. So all of those are restricted funds. Federal is restricted, child nutrition is restricted, and one of our principles that we talked about a moment ago for activity funds, you make sure that they're established for a particular need, and you make sure that they are expended for that need. So activity funds are restricted in that sense. So funds 1, 2, and 4, they drive our net legal balance. This worksheet we put in every month so that you can have a visual on where we are in that net legal balance as we approach the end of the year.
So the 98 million does not include any federal monies.
That's correct.
So where is the personal property taxes that are paid in October? Is that state money?
That's a state money. That's going to be under local taxes.
That's local taxes.
Yes, that'll be on the local tax line. And if you'll notice so when they collect them in October, we're always getting them a month behind. So if you'll notice the big number in local property taxes in November, it's that $13 million number. You'll see that it trends in July, August, September. We have income there from taxes, and that's usually from sometimes people paying their taxes early. Most of the time it's collection of delinquent taxes, but then everyone pays in October, and then that transfers to us in November. So we have a big collection. We'll also, as you watch your packet, you'll see we also have a larger collection in the month of April than we normally do, because people who use escrow accounts for their property taxes, those get paid in the month of March to the state. So those end up coming to us in the month of April. So there's a big bump in the month of November and a smaller bump in the month of April, but we do get revenue throughout the year from that source.
I noticed salaries. What is the big bump you get in May? Is that paying out benefits for people who retire, or I mean, what happens in May that you have?
No, in May, that's our summer payrolls that happen. So as you recall, we pay employees over 24 pays, and so we pay in the month of June, in May, we pay out May, and then in June, we pay out June, July, and the first payment of August. Our employee payment starts the second payment in August, so August the 25th. So their 24 pays take them through July. But we have to expend it in this fiscal year, so we have to calculate all of those payrolls in the month of June to close our fiscal books. Now, some districts wait. They calculate the payrolls, and then they pay them. They pay June's on June 10th, June 25th, July's on July 10th, July 25th, and August 10th on August 10th. Some districts hold those funds back and pay them when they're actually due. At North Little Rock, we pay them all out in the month of June. So a teacher gets all of their summer pays in the month of June because they've completed their contract. We don't withhold those funds. So that's why you see a big bump in salary and fringe expenditures in that month.
Okay, all right.
Yep. Good question.
Well, just curious, do they not want to be paid out through the summer instead of getting it all at once? I mean, can you not do like an journal entry to accrue it, reverse it out, and still account for it that way, or is that just too much?
Well, it would be, the answer is yes, we can do that. We can accrue it. But I guess a decision was made long before I arrived that when we do those summer payouts, that we pay them out to teachers before they leave and go home. I mean, after they finish their contract, but before that June 30th deadline of closing the book. So
Back in the day, we did get paid the whole summer. We had it on our payday throughout the whole summer.
The question is, we
Now,
can do that.
we
right?
can.
That's-
So
I
there
myself too.
there
I
are
liked it
pros and
that way.
I
cons.
would want to.
There are pros and cons to that. If you expend that on your May and June books, but you pay it out in July and August, there would be a bank variance, a hefty bank variance, because your books are saying you've expended those salaries, but the bank says I haven't paid them out yet. So our bank rec is where you compare the book and the bank, and if it doesn't match that zero variance that you all look for every month in there for the bank rec, if you didn't pay it out when it was created on the books, you would create a bank variance there for 2 to 3 months. So it would actually create one for June, July, and August. So there are drawbacks to doing that, but
I know it would be a headache for bookkeeping, but
Most-
like I said, back in the day, we used to have an option.
yeah.
For those
Yes.
that wanted one lump sum, they receive one lump sum. I was just one of those, send it to me on the regular payday.
Right,
It's
right.
easier to budget.
Do you,
Right.
and I know this accounting is different than what I'm used to, but do you not have a separate, like, balance sheet kind of account that wouldn't be caught up in that, where you can shove it over here on the like, balance sheet type thing, and you wouldn't see it in that variance?
No, in the bank rec, it only looks at cash on hand at the bank and cash on hand at the book, on the book.
Okay.
And so it only compares those two items. There are ways that we can make that happen. It's just not an efficient model to do it. When we pay it out in June, we pay it to employees, and
Okay, I was just curious, because I
yes.
saw that big jump, and I thought that's just.
that's the reason for it. Those are summer payrolls going out. That's
So,
all.
and to go back off of Ms. Temple, that would then make that's increasing the amount of tax. If they're getting it all at one time, that's taking like a big chunk out as far, they don't, okay.
No, so we actually conduct a payroll for each one. So,
Okay.
your payroll, your tax liability is dependent on the number of payrolls you get. So we get 24. And whether that payroll is one of your 24 or if it's
Okay,
an
gotcha.
additional one. So all employees get 24 pays. So we'll do like June 10th payroll, and we'll transfer that one to them. So they don't get it all in one transaction lump sum. They'll get June 10th on one day. On another day, they'll get June 25th. On another day, they'll get July 10th. On another day, they'll get July 25th. And on another day, they'll get August 10th. So and I'm speaking generally for 190-day employees, because some people that are on extended contracts, they'll get, their payroll actually starts earlier and ends earlier, so just in general terms. But those employees get a separate deposit for each payroll. It is one of the 24, so the taxation on it is level and
Okay.
appropriate, and they don't experience an increased taxation because of that.
Okay.
Why is the federal revenue not included on this?
Because this is our net legal balance worksheet, which is, this is the driving force. This is what the state uses to determine fiscal distress. This is what they look at to see, is a district in trouble financially or not? What they don't want to do is they don't want to see districts using activity funds, child nutrition, or federal funds, creating a false image of their financial situation. So when this financial picture is done, the state says you should not include Fund 6, Fund 8, Fund 7, because we want a true picture of your net legal balance.
So are these salaries and benefits not including the people that get paid Title I?
That's correct. This is only net, this particular worksheet is only Funds 1, 2, and 4. So only 1 and 2, Fund 4 is your debt service, so we don't have any salaries out of there. So Fund 1 and 2 are the funds where you would look at expenditures and salary benefits, and it would correlate to this worksheet.
And the federal funds are what source? They have a number?
Number 6.
6.
And child nutrition is number 8. And then
So
activity.
they show on some other sheet.
Yes. And our next board workshop, we're going to start with our board report, that report that you get in there, and that one has them categorized by Fund 1, Fund 2, Fund 4, Fund 6, Fund 7, Fund 8. So they're all identified there. We'll cover that, and you can get expenditures of salary and benefits from that board report for federal from that report. And I'll show, that'll be what we start with at our next board
But
meeting.
this one is really the one the state
That's
is concerned with.
Well, the state's concerned with all funds, but this one is the one the state looks at to determine what's your financial health of your district, and they look at net legal funds to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
So is that just as we kind of close out? I'm probably thinking budget in small doses is the right way to go.
Yes, yes.
We won't go 8 hours in. We'll try to keep
Yeah.
it to 15 or 20, and I think that's for
This was great.
Yes.
that is all we have for the workshop.
That is it. That is all.